Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Story 1, The Trail Vanishes. Brent was an experienced hiker. He had hiked in the Rockies, the Appalachians, even solo traversed parts of the Andes. So a weekend trip to the dense, untouched pine forests of northern Washington didn't intimidate him. He craved the solitude. He set off with just a backpack, a map, and a GPS device, heading toward a spot called Dead Elk Hollow, a quiet valley known for its raw beauty and near total silence. The trees were tall and packed tight, their branches blotting out the sun even at noon. 3 hours into the hike, the trail faded, not gradually, like a path overgrown with time. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. The forest floor ahead was completely undisturbed, untouched by boots or animals. He checked his GPS, it showed him squarely on the trail, yet he saw only unbroken wilderness. That's when the silence deepened. No birds, no wind, not even the distant crack of branches. He turned around to retrace his steps. The trail behind him was gone too. Brent spun in circles, confused. The forest now seemed unfamiliar, warped. He tried walking in a straight line back the way he'd come. After an hour, he came upon a tree that had a long, claw-shaped scar in the bark. He recognized it. It had been beside the original trail. He had just walked in a circle. Panic began to creep in, but what unnerved him more than being lost was the growing feeling that he was being watched. He didn't hear anything, but he felt it, like something just beyond the tree line was pacing with him. That night, he built a small fire and huddled beneath his tarp. Around 2 a.m., the fire died down, and that's when he heard it, breathing, slow, deep, animal-like, no more than 10 feet away. He didn't sleep. When the morning light filtered through the trees, there were no tracks, no sign of what had been there, just the same claw-marked tree. He eventually stumbled upon a ranger station 2 days later, dehydrated and shaking. When he told the ranger where he'd tried to hike, the man just stared at him and said quietly, "People don't go to Dead Elk Hollow anymore, not since the disappearances." Story 2, The Howl That Knew Your Name. In the forests of southern Oregon, a woman named Marla was house-sitting for her uncle. His cabin was deep in the woods, no neighbors for miles, no phone service, just satellite internet and radio. The first night was peaceful. She listened to the wind in the trees, read by the fire, and fell asleep easily. But the second night, something howled in the distance. Not a wolf, not a coyote. It was too long, too low. It didn't sound natural. She ignored it until it came again the next night. Closer. By the 4th night, the howling was directly outside, but when she peered through the window, she saw nothing. That morning, she found deep gouges in the wood near the back door, like claws. She tried to call her uncle via satellite, but the connection refused to hold, only bursts of static. That night, the howling started earlier, and this time, it spoke. She swears it said her name. Marilea. Drawn out and broken, like a voice trying to learn human speech. She locked herself in the bathroom, flashlight and axe in hand, and waited for morning. The next day, she drove straight to the nearest town. The sheriff there didn't laugh. He said her uncle's dog had gone missing a year ago. Same story. Howling, claw marks, a voice that almost spoke. They call it the Hollow Stalker, and it only mimics what it eats. Story 3, The Shelter in the Pines. 2 brothers, Sean and Caleb, were camping in Montana's Flathead Forest. One evening, after dinner, they noticed something strange, a man in the trees, not far off, half hidden behind a pine, just watching. They called out. No answer. They approached, and the figure was gone. That night, they heard rustling, but chalked it up to deer. The next morning, their food was gone, despite their supplies being hoisted on a rope between trees. The knot had been untied, not torn. On the 3rd day, they found something new, a small wooden shelter hidden behind thick brush. It hadn't been there before. It looked old but sturdy, with a curtain for a door. Curious and stupid, they went inside. The floor was covered with bones, not animal bones, small human ones, skulls, finger bones, bits of cloth and teeth. Then they saw it, carved into the back wall, a sentence in crude English, as if written with a knife. "The woods feed me what they forget." They ran. They didn't stop until they reached the ranger outpost 14 miles away. When they brought the rangers back, the shelter was gone. No bones, no carving, just undisturbed brush. But in the clearing where it had stood, something new had appeared. Their rope, their supplies, hung from a tree. And on the ground, a new carving in bark. Next time, don't look inside. Would you like me to continue with a fourth story or adapt this into a script or video narration format? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, bonus story. Bonus story, The Cabin That Waited. Eli was an amateur wildlife photographer. He'd read about a stretch of forest land in northern Idaho that was rarely traversed, full of hidden trails and forgotten wildlife paths, perfect for spotting undisturbed creatures, he thought. He packed light, carried extra batteries, and brought a radio for emergencies. After 2 days of hiking, he found a clearing, and in the center of it stood something he hadn't expected. A cabin. Not abandoned, well-maintained, fresh wood, smoke curling from the chimney, and a door slightly ajar as though inviting him inside. But this cabin wasn't on any map, not listed, not referenced by any ranger. No roads led to it. He radioed out to check if there was any registered structure in the area. Static, dead air. He approached carefully. As he reached for the door, it slowly swung open on its own. A cold gust rolled out. Inside was clean, too clean, no dust, a kettle on the stove, steaming, a single chair beside the window. He backed out, suddenly overwhelmed by the feeling he'd interrupted something. He turned to leave, but the forest had changed. The clearing was still there, but the trail he had come from was gone, completely, just thick, impenetrable pine. When he turned back toward the cabin, it had changed too. The door was now closed. And the window, which had been empty, now had a face in it. Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, bonus story 2. Bonus story 2, The Thing That Dug Up the Grave. In the wild highlands of West Virginia, nestled in a forgotten patch of forest near an old mining town, there's a place locals call Black Hollow, not because of how it looks, but because of what it takes. Diane and her boyfriend, Malcolm, were amateur explorers. They weren't thrill seekers, just interested in lost places. Black Hollow wasn't on maps anymore, but it showed up in old newspaper clippings from the 1950s, reports of missing miners, strange animal sightings, and one chilling headline, "Churchyard Dug Up Overnight, Bodies Gone." Naturally, they went. The hike-in was difficult. No real path, just whispers of deer trails and broken branches. By late afternoon, they found it, the collapsed frame of a chapel, its steeple rotted and broken, and behind it, a small graveyard swallowed by roots and time. The stones were crooked, moss-covered, names worn away, but all the earth had been disturbed. Every grave had been opened, not by weather, not by animals, dug, neatly, deeply. Diane turned to Malcolm. "Someone's been here recently." Then they noticed the footprints, long, narrow, like a human foot stretched grotesquely. They circled the graves, and then stopped, right behind them. Something was there. A low groan rose from the tree line, as if the woods themselves were clearing their throat. They ran. As they did, they heard it following, not crashing, not sprinting, digging, the sound of hands in the earth, claws through damp soil. When they finally reached their truck, breathless and muddy, Malcolm turned to look back down the trail. There was a figure standing just beyond the tree line, unmoving, watching. In its hand, it held something pale. A femur. Back in town, they asked a local historian about the church. He went silent, then handed them a photo from 1956. It showed the graveyard as it had once been. In the center was a new grave. The name? Diane Montgomery. Her full name. She had never been there before, not in this life. Would you like me to continue with more stories in this series or turn it into a full anthology? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, bonus story 3. Bonus story 3, The Whistler in the Fog. In the misty forests near the Blue Ridge Mountains, fog doesn't just roll in, it arrives, like it's following something, or hiding it. 17-year-old Paul learned that the hard way. He was on a solo camping trip, a rite of passage among his family's outdoorsy tradition. His grandfather had done it. His dad had done it. And now it was his turn, one full night alone in the woods. He set up camp near a creek and kept a small fire going. The evening was peaceful. Birds, wind, the murmur of the stream, until the fog rolled in. It came fast. In less than 5 minutes, everything beyond 20 feet was gone, swallowed. The sounds, too, dimmed. No birds, no breeze, just a thick white silence. Then came the whistle. High, clear, just 3 notes. Like a simple melody someone might hum to themselves, but it came from inside the fog. Paul called out, thinking it might be a hiker. No answer, just the whistle again, 3 notes. He grabbed his flashlight and scanned the fog. It reached maybe 10 feet before the beam vanished. He shouted again. The whistle repeated, closer. This time, there was something different. The rhythm matched his heartbeat, the exact same pace. Paul backed toward his tent and zippered it shut, though it offered no comfort. From inside, he heard the whistle once more, right beside the canvas. He held his breath. Then something scraped along the side of the tent, slow, deliberate, like a fingernail tracing a warning. He passed out sometime after that, not from sleep, from sheer adrenaline crashing. When he woke, the fog was gone. The woods were bright and calm again, but on a rock near his dead fire, something had been left behind. A piece of paper, torn and damp. On it, written in smeared charcoal. You listened, now it knows your rhythm. Paul never goes camping anymore. He hasn't even left town in years, not after the whistle followed him home. Sometimes, late at night, when the fog returns, he hears those same 3 notes again. And they're always just outside the window. Would you like the full series compiled into a formatted ebook, narration script, or a new forest-themed horror anthology title next? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, Bonus Story 4. Bonus Story 4, The Lantern That Followed. Back in the 90s, 3 college friends, Rich, Tanya, and Deshawn, went hiking in a part of northern Maine nicknamed the Throat. Locals called it that because the valley narrowed unnaturally, the trees curving in like ribs, and sound never seemed to echo the way it should. The group wasn't scared. They were loud, joking, drinking. They weren't even halfway to their camping spot when Tanya pointed toward the ridgeline. A lantern was swaying there, flickering orange light, moving slowly between the trees. At first, they thought it was another hiker, but as they watched, the light moved. Wrong. Not like someone walking. It drifted, too smooth, too high off the ground. And it started to follow them. No matter how far they hiked or what turn they took, the lantern stayed just out of reach, but always visible, always just behind the trees. Deshawn yelled out, "You need something?" The lantern went out. They laughed it off, nervous laughs, set up camp, built a fire, tried to drown their unease with more beer. That night, around 2 a.m., Rich woke up to the sound of footsteps. He peeked outside the tent. The lantern had returned. But this time, it was right outside the camp, swinging gently. There was no one holding it. Just the light, hovering, watching. Then it began to move, circling the tent slowly. Once, twice, a third time. Then it stopped directly in front of Tanya's tent. The flame inside flared bright, illuminating something behind it. A figure, tall, thin, head bent too far, arms too long. And it was smiling. Rich screamed, and the lantern vanished. No sound, no motion, just gone. They broke camp before dawn and ran until they reached the nearest highway. Tanya never spoke about what she saw in the tent that night, but she moved states the next month and changed her phone number. Years later, Rich got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was an old camping lantern. And a single note. You left something behind. It didn't. Let me know if you'd like more stories, or if you'd prefer this collected into a PDF, audio script, or turned into a YouTube-style horror narration script. Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, Bonus Story V. Bonus Story V, The Thing That Climbed Down. In the deep green of Oregon's coastal rainforest, where the moss hangs thick like curtains and the canopy blocks out the stars, a trail called Devil's Spine winds through a forgotten mountain ridge. It's closed to the public now, but 10 years ago, a park ranger named Elise used to patrol it, alone. She'd walk it weekly, keeping an eye out for poachers or campers, logging trail conditions. It was quiet work, peaceful. Until one Wednesday morning in late October. She was halfway along the ridge, nearly 2,000 feet up, when she heard footsteps above her. Not rocks falling. Deliberate footsteps, from the trees overhead. She froze. The canopy here was dense, ancient, no hiking trails above, no chance of anyone climbing there easily. Then the sound changed, from footsteps to scraping, like something with claws was descending the trunk behind her. She turned and saw it. Not all of it, just a shape, long, pale, limbs two-jointed, like a spider mimicking a person. It hung upside down, gripping the trunk with toes and fingers that were more like hooks. And it had no face, just a stretched mouth, curved wide open, as if stuck mid-scream, but no sound came out. Elise dropped her radio, ran. She didn't stop running until she was off the ridge. She didn't report it, because who would believe her? But she told one other ranger, her old mentor. He didn't laugh. Instead, he handed her a faded file marked with red tape. Inside were reports going back 40 years. Same area, same description. At the bottom was a note. It doesn't live in the forest. The forest grows around it. The trail was closed within a month. Elise quit the job the same year. But sometimes, on nights when the wind's just right, she swears she hears something scraping across her roof. And the sound is always coming down. Want the next bonus story? Or would you like a dark forest horror anthology title for all these to go under? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, Bonus Story 6. Bonus Story 6, The Sleeping Man Beneath the Roots. In the depths of the Adirondack Mountains, there's a patch of woods known by locals as the Leaning Pines. The trees all tilt slightly inward, as if bowing toward something buried at the center. In 2003, a biology grad student named Aaron was doing fieldwork there, documenting fungal growth patterns in old-growth forests. He was staying alone in a makeshift tent site with gear, cameras, and soil kits. For the first few days, things were normal, quiet, peaceful, uneventful. Until he found the mound. It was about 4 feet high and 10 feet long, covered in moss. At first, he assumed it was a fallen log, but when he scraped some moss away, it revealed something else underneath. Not wood, not rock, skin. Thick, pale, and breathing. The mound rose and fell, barely, like something in a deep, unnatural sleep. He backed away slowly, but as he did, he stepped on a pine branch. It cracked. The breathing stopped. Then, without moving, the ground around the mound shivered, not from wind, from awareness. Aaron turned and ran, but the forest had changed. Every tree seemed to lean harder, branches hung lower. He tripped twice, scraped his arm, but didn't stop. When he finally reached camp, everything was different. His tent had collapsed. His gear was shredded, not by animals, but carefully, precisely. His voice recorder was still working, though. On it, hours of static, until 2:33 a.m. Then a voice, not his, not human. Awake. Just that word, whispered. He left that night, never returned. A year later, a team of surveyors tried to map that region. Their drone feed cut out mid-flight. The drone was later found 20 miles away, its casing melted from the inside. And in the video that survived? Just frames. One showed a clearing with tilted pines. And at the center, a man-sized hole in the earth. Empty. Waiting. Would you like another continuation, or shall we give the anthology a name and cover-style description next? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, Bonus Story 7. Bonus Story 7, The Backward One. In the quiet expanse of Minnesota's boundary waters, there are islands so isolated they don't even have names, just coordinates passed between old trappers and bush pilots. One of those nameless islands is where Evan, a wilderness guide, took two tourists for a weekend canoe trip. They were a couple from the city, curious, inexperienced, but respectful. They pitched tents, started a fire, and marveled at the silence. But that first night, something felt wrong. The woods weren't quiet. They were listening. Evan noticed it around midnight. The usual sounds, crickets, owls, wind, had stopped. The fire flickered oddly, as if disturbed by movement too fast to see. Then came the whispering. It didn't sound like voices, more like breathing turned into language. He stepped away from the tents to investigate, flashlight in hand, when he spotted a figure at the edge of the trees. It was a man, naked, pale, thin, facing away. "Hey," Evan called. The man didn't move. But then his head turned. Not his body, just his head, slowly rotating completely around to face Evan. The body remained perfectly still. The face was wide-eyed, twisted in a grin too long, too many teeth. Its neck cracked as it finished the turn. Evan froze. The thing began to walk backward, not stumbling, but smooth, like it had practiced. Evan ran back to the tents, told the couple to pack now, but when they emerged from their tent, the woman gasped. "Who's that behind you?" He turned. No one there. But in the dirt behind them, bare footprints had appeared, facing the wrong direction. They left everything behind, just the clothes on their backs and a canoe. Evan paddled until sunrise, refusing to look at the shoreline. Back in town, he checked the trail log. Someone had signed in under his name. The handwriting was perfect. Except it was written backward. Ready for the next one? Or would you like a cover description and title for the full horror anthology this series has become? Alone and Hunted, 3 True Horror Stories from the Heart of the Forest. Continued, Bonus Story 8. Bonus Story 8, The Cry That Wasn't a Baby. Deep in the Ozark wilderness, there's a place the locals refuse to name, not because it's cursed, but because saying the name invites it closer. In 2015, two sisters, Mallory and Jess, set out to backpack a secluded part of the Ozarks after reading an obscure hiking blog that promised untouched beauty and miles without another soul. They got both. On the second night, as they were eating canned beans by a fire, Mallory froze. "Do you hear that?" Jess paused, listening. From somewhere in the trees, far off but distinct, came the sound of a baby crying. Faint, mournful, wet. But they were 40 miles from any town, in elevation, with no sign of another camper. No one hikes here with a baby. The crying continued off and on for nearly an hour. Jess wanted to investigate. Mallory insisted they stay put. Then, after midnight, it changed. The cry came back, closer. But now it was wrong. Too loud, too consistent, as if something was mimicking the sound and hadn't learned to modulate it. Every few seconds, the exact same pitch, same inhale, like a recording, not a living thing. Jess shone her flashlight into the trees and caught a flash of two eyes, reflective, but too far apart. Then something answered the cry. From the other side of the forest, a second voice called out. Another fake baby cry, slower, deeper, as if two things were calling to each other, playing roles they didn't understand. Then twigs snapped, just feet away. They ran. Didn't pack, didn't look back, hiked 6 hours through darkness and fog to reach a road. When they reported the sound to the Forest Service, the ranger just looked down and said, "You were lucky." He pulled out a worn page from a report dated 1979. It read, "Two missing, tent torn, only clue, recorded baby cries, looped endlessly, left playing on a rusted tape recorder, sitting in the dirt, no sign of the victims." Jess doesn't remember most of that night anymore. But sometimes, when she hears a baby cry on TV, she covers her ears. Because if she listens too long, she starts to hear the other one calling back. Want to keep going with more terrifying tales from the woods? Or are you ready for me to compile and title the full horror collection? Alone and Hunted, 3 True Horror Stories from the Heart of the Forest. Continued, Bonus Story 9. Bonus Story 9, The Fire That Wouldn't Burn Out. In the forests of Northern California, not far from a closed-off section of old logging land, there's a burned clearing the locals call Ash Circle. Fire crews say it doesn't show up on maps, not as a wildfire zone, not as anything officially recorded, but the ground's always black, always warm, like something beneath it is still smoldering. In 2007, a young man named Kyle went camping with his cousin Jonah near that area. They weren't looking for trouble, just wanted one last weekend off-grid before Kyle shipped out for basic training. They set up camp near a river bend, but on the second night, Jonah spotted a flickering orange glow deep in the trees. "I think someone's got a fire going." Kyle decided to investigate, thinking it might be a stranded hiker or drunk camper. They followed the glow for nearly 20 minutes until the trees opened up. And they saw it. A perfect circle of scorched ground, maybe 50 feet wide, at its center, a fire, roaring tall, fed by no wood, no fuel, just rising out of the dirt like it was bleeding flame. There was no heat. They stepped closer. That's when Jonah noticed it, footprints in the ash, dozens, all leading into the fire. None leading out. Then the sound started. Voices, whispers, all around them, some calling their names, some sounding like their own voices, repeated back at them off by a second, echoes that shouldn't exist. Kyle grabbed Jonah's arm. "We're leaving, now." But the fire grew. And something began to rise from it. Not a person, not an animal, just shape, glowing like coal, made of smoke, with arms like torn cloth and a face that burned like paper. It moved without walking, closer. They ran. Later that night, as they huddled near their dead campfire, Kyle checked his camera. He'd had it strapped to his chest the whole time. Only one photo had been saved. It showed Jonah, staring, pale, terrified. Behind him, at the edge of the clearing, was the fire. And something standing in it. Arms open, waiting. To this day, the GPS coordinates from that night lead to nothing but forest. But Kyle still has the photo. The image won't delete, won't print, won't upload. And no matter what he does, the fire in the picture still glows. Ready for the next story? Or would you like a collection name, intro, and horror anthology wrap-up to package them all? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, Bonus Story X. Bonus Story X, the thing that dug itself out. Somewhere in the deep woods of Montana lies an old survivalist compound, buried in the 1980s. Never finished. Locals call the area Dead Man's Bluff, not because of any visible danger, but because nothing stays buried there. In 2011, a forest restoration crew stumbled upon the place during a controlled burn prep. Elena, the team's lead, noticed the disturbed dirt first, a wide patch of earth that looked like it had been churned from beneath. Not dug in from above, something had climbed out. They found an old steel hatch under the soil, rusted, broken open, tools, torn tarp, and bones surrounded it, human-sized, but chewed. The next night, their campsite was trashed. Nothing stolen, nothing moved far, but every item, every bag, shovel, glove, was coated in a fine layer of dirt, like they'd been buried, then unburied. The team laughed it off. Except Elena. Because she'd woken up that night to the sound of scratching beneath her tent. Not next to it, not around it. Underneath. On the third night, a team member vanished. No sound, no struggle, just gone. They found her boots 15 feet away, standing upright, as if she'd sunk into the ground and left them behind. They called in the ranger service. A sweep team arrived at dawn, armed and grim-faced. When Elena asked what they were looking for, one ranger answered. "Something we thought was sealed in, something that remembers the sound of dirt falling on its face." The crew was evacuated. The site was marked off limits. Satellite images now blur that patch of forest, like it's been erased. But Elena kept one thing, her trail cam footage. The night before they left, it caught something rising from the dirt behind her tent. Not walking, not crawling. Swimming through the earth. And at the very end of the footage, as it turns its head toward the camera, it smiles. Its mouth is full of fingernails. Would you like more tales next, or shall I now compile and title this full terrifying anthology of forest horror? Alone and Hunted, 3 true horror stories from the heart of the forest. Continued, bonus story 11. Bonus story 11, The Man in the Birch Mask. In the snowy forests of Vermont, hunters tell quiet stories about a figure that only appears during the coldest, quietest nights. They call him Birchface, not out of legend, but fear. He wears the forest like a costume, and he doesn't blink. In 2018, a wildlife researcher named Aaron rented a cabin near Mad Tom Notch to document nocturnal movement with trail cameras and thermal drones. The area was perfect, remote, untouched, and silent. For the first 3 nights, she caught nothing unusual: deer, snowshoe hares, one bobcat. But on the 4th night, she checked her camera feed and froze. A man, standing in frame, naked from the neck down, his face completely covered by a mask carved from birch bark, the slits for eyes and mouth jagged and uneven, like they'd been torn open. He didn't move, he didn't flinch, he just stood there, in below freezing temperatures, for 3 hours. At one point, he tilted his head to stare directly at the lens. Erin packed to leave the next morning. But when she got to her car, it wouldn't start. She returned to the cabin, trying to radio for help. No signal. That night, the doorknob rattled. When she checked the feed again, she saw the man in the birch mask, closer, not on the trail, at the cabin's edge. Each camera angle that should have shown empty snow showed him. Always watching, always standing just far enough away that it could be coincidence, until he raised a hand and waved. But he didn't wave at the camera. He waved at her. The next morning, there were footprints in the snow, but only one set, his. They circled the cabin exactly 11 times. Erin was airlifted out 2 days later. She left her equipment behind. Months later, a forest ranger doing a sweep found one of her trail cams still functioning. It had only one file on it. A still image, dated the week after she left. It showed the inside of the cabin, from the perspective of someone standing in the corner. And in the photo, Erin's name was scratched into the wall, over and over and over again. Shall we go deeper into the forest, or give this entire collection its final form, a haunting title, chilling anthology description, and a dark cover concept?